Hi everyone, my name is T. Botnick and I use they, them pronouns. And I'm here to talk a little bit about how to pledge. I know everybody's been talking about why to pledge, but I think that for a lot of people, when we're talking about combining our values and money and math, that feels really overwhelming. So I wanted to break it down into a few easy steps. You may have heard people talking about the suggested Fair Share Giving Guide that the Unitarian Universalist Association has put together. You can find this by Googling UUA Fair Share Giving Guide. However, once you're looking at this table, you might still find this overwhelming because it's still just a bunch of numbers. So I wanted to break it down even more. Let's start with this column, the annual adjusted income. How do you find that? So step one, find your pay stub. Generally, the most recent one is good. And then what you're looking for in that pay stub is your net pay. So what do you make after the taxes are taken out and your deductions for health insurance and all that kind of stuff are taken out? Once you find your net pay, then you're going to multiply that either by 52 if you're paid weekly, or 26 if you're paid bi-weekly, or 12 if you're paid monthly. And that will give you your total adjusted income. Once you have your adjusted income, there's a second step. You need to think about some additional context than just your income. So, for example, a lot of us have privileges or disadvantages in our society that are structural and a bit out of our control that add to the picture of our total family wealth. So, a friend of mine runs an apothecary business, and she has this contextual sliding scale guide that I thought would be useful for us to think about as context to our income. So if you're thinking about the Fair Share Giving Guide, think about the columns in the Giving Guide and whether you're going to move to the left or the right on those columns, given this additional context. So some examples to this context are if you're supporting children or other dependents, or if you have debt, or you have medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance, or you have incarceration history that makes it difficult to find work, or you don't have personal savings or a 401k or intergenerational wealth. On the other side, if you own the home you live in, if you have investments or a 401k, if you have intergenerational wealth, if you travel for fun, if you work part-time, and you're able to still maintain a lifestyle, including being fully enrolled in school. Or if you have a relatively high earning power, but you're perhaps not choosing to exercise it right now, but you still have that power given your education, your gender, your race, etc. Once you have this context, then you can go back to the Giving Guide. So now we know our adjusted annual income, and then we know what column of the Giving Guide that we want to use. And from there, we can find about what percent the UUA suggests that you should be donating and what that monthly amount will look like. So I hope that you found this mini tutorial helpful in breaking down the steps of how to live out your values and give generously and not be overwhelmed by the math.
Tracy, All Souls is coming back.
It is.
You can just feel the energy here in the sanctuary, in the RE space. The choir concert a couple of weeks ago.
It was great.
Meredith Higgins Hargrave's birthday party with all of the little kids listening to the drumming and the juggler. It was just wonderful. And you know, the money that we raised last fall, that's a part of the renewing energy as well.
Yeah, and I think the challenge will be going forward. We need to continue that growth and generosity. We're going to need the congregation's support in order to continue to regather and to continue to do it well.
Indeed, indeed. That's why we're doing the As Love Shows Us How Spring Generosity campaign, trying to shift the language toward generosity. And you know what I do. I was looking at the numbers just last week and was very pleased because the increases for each pledge were really quite nice. And then I realized that we only had 1 in 5 of our members who had made a pledge already, and that there were 4 in 5 still to come. And I started right away to craft a message to those people, saying, urging them, pleading with them. And then I realized that I hadn't made my pledge either.
Yes.
So I right away went to the website and I made my pledge and felt really good about it. I increased it quite a bit as I was able. You pledged in the fall.
I did pledge, and I remember to do it online.
Excellent.
Yes.
And have you made your pledge for the next year?
I've made my pledge for the next year. I've pledged for Funding Our Future and for As Love Shows Us How, because the work here at All Souls is just that important to me. I'm just as invested.
Excellent. Excellent.
And if all of you, if you've forgotten to pledge, or that piece of paper and that pledge card is still just sitting on the top of your stack at home, remember to pledge today. We do need your pledges in by April 1st, because we're doing our budgeting a bit different this year. Instead of building a budget on promises, we are building a budget on actual pledges received. And so in order for Bill and I to present a budget that will eventually come to the congregation for approval, we need to know what your promises are to pay.
And we need to know by April 1st so that Tracy and I can do our work that she just described. What we know is that All Souls is important to so many of you, just as it's important to us. And the other thing that we know is that we can get this done, that we can allow love to show us how in this diverse, spirit-growing, justice-seeking, beloved community of All Souls.
Amen.
Amen. Good morning, All Souls. The words of one of the most widely used covenants in the liberal church. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Love is the doctrine of this church. I'm Reverend Bill Sinkford. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome, everyone, to All Souls, everyone here in the sanctuary, and everyone who is joining us online. Welcome, everyone, to this diverse, spirit-growing, justice-seeking, beloved community of All Souls. Many of you know our liturgist this morning, Tracy Hughes Trotter. You know her as the executive director here at All Souls, and in that video she and I just did. What most of you probably do not know is that Tracy has begun seminary at Wesley Theological School. On a path toward Unitarian Universalist ministry. She is here, you can applaud for that too. She is here on the chancel in that capacity this morning. So please welcome Tracy to this additional and new role in worship leadership. Each Sunday, we light our chalice to kindle the flame of community once again. We light our chalice in faith, in hope, and in love.
Good morning, All Souls. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit.
Good morning, All Souls. My name is Lori Carafone, and I am your worship associate this morning. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to All Souls Church. Tomorrow marks the spring equinox, which starts at the same moment for everyone, wherever we are around the globe. At this inflection point, may we all experience renewal and hope, the spark of new beginnings. I'd like to offer a special welcome this morning to those who are new or feeling new at All Souls. Please raise your hand in person or on Zoom so we can give you a warm All Souls welcome. Are there any visitors? We are glad you're here. For those of you joining us online, we welcome you into this sacred space where you may find community, refuge, hope, and healing. We may be geographically separated, but we gather as one. If you are in the sanctuary, printed programs are available with the ushers, or you can pull up the order of service on your phone using the QR code on the back of the pew in front of you. Select the code on the right. For those on Zoom, a link to the order of service is in the chat. Many events are in our Friday email newsletter, in this morning's order of service, Sign up on the All Souls website to get the newsletter and important announcements. A link is also in the Zoom chat. After the service, come to Pierce Hall to enjoy coffee and conversation. Pierce Hall is out the door on your right and across the hall. This morning, we welcome Jean DeOrleans from South Carolina to offer our land acknowledgement. Jean is part of the large community of All Souls members and friends who join us in worship virtually. She has visited the sanctuary a couple of times when in DC on a Sunday, but she is with us almost every Sunday online from her home in South Carolina. Welcome, Jean.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jean Faith DeOrleans. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Before any white man set foot on the lands where we live, it was settled by the foremothers and fathers of First Nation communities. For thousands of years, Indigenous Americans developed their traditions and legacy without disturbance. It's a narrative of beautiful arts and crafts and deep spirituality. So today I would like to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous peoples of the United States, and in particular the Congaree, whose traditional and unceded territories include the town now known as Irmo, South Carolina. Well, this is the place where I live. Have attended church with you virtually every Sunday for more than 2 years, and from where I speak to you today. All Souls Church Unitarian sits upon the land of the Nacotchtank. The river surrounding the eastern border of Washington, D.C., and the neighborhood in the southeast part of the city are named Anacostia after the Latinized version of Nacotchtank. In some ways, this is their legacy. The legacy of the Congaree here in South Carolina is also a named river and a national park. The Congaree National Park is the largest intact expanse of old-growth bottomland hardwood forest remaining in the southeast United States, and it's a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. As amazing as all that is, the Congaree is actually one of the 6 least visited national parks in the country, and so I invite you to come visit. Speaking of visiting, I have visited the land of many of our original people when I've traveled for work or pleasure over the last years. If away during a time frame that includes a Sunday, I often find a Unitarian Universalist church or fellowship. I arrive as a visitor, yet also a family member, having been born a UUer. This has given me the feeling that I always have a soft place to land with others who have found their way to that place, where we make a promise from the heart to each other. As it's explained in the UUA website, covenant is the silk that joins UU congregations, communities, and individuals like me and you together in a web of interconnection. The practice of promising to walk together is the precious core of our creedless faith. Covenant, it's both a noun and a verb, and I plan to verb it often.
Thank you so much, Jean. We invite you to greet and behold one another now. We invite you to greet and behold one another now. So on Zoom, go to the gallery view to wave and say hello. In the sanctuary, please greet each other in the way that feels best. Say hello to the folks on Zoom who see us through the cameras in the real balcony. Thank you, everyone. Let's please continue conversations after the service. And again, welcome to All Souls Church.
Good morning. So, my name is Tracy Hughes Trotter. I know many of you. First, I have to say this is wild because when I was busy making plans, God was apparently laughing. So, I'm so glad to be here with you in the capacity as liturgist. I'm also happy to announce that the calendar continues to overflow with activities this month. I'll name just a few this morning. You can get the full download of the calendar of events in the order of service. Mindful Souls Meditation is meeting later today, starting at noon until 12:45 in Classroom 2. And coming up on March 21st, the Kindred Spirits Men's Group will meet at 7 p.m. on Zoom. If you'd like more information about this, go to the All Souls website and scroll down to the calendar. You'll need to contact the person listed there to get the Zoom link. And if you're doing some spring cleaning and clearing out the kids' closets, bring their clothes to the annual children's clothing swap. There are donation bins around the building, and you can drop the items off by Friday, March 24th. We need clothes. Many of you have children and young ones. They grow out of their clothes so quickly. Drop their clothes off and you can swap them. It's a good thing. I'm bringing my daughter's clothes. We also need to help sort. We need help sorting and displaying the clothes in Pierce Hall. And if you'd like to volunteer to sign up, you can also go to the website and just sign up on the link. As Reverend Rob reminded us so eloquently last week, we should all be concerned about DC statehood. It is not a local issue, it is a national issue. And on the 26th, there will be a gathering on the topic immediately after the church service. There will also be a guest speaker at that event. The speaker's name is Maya Efrati. She is the Public Policy Counsel at the Brennan Center for Justice. RSVP information is in the order of service and also on the All Souls website. All Souls Passover Seder is Saturday, April 15th. It's a multi-generational social justice event, and we especially invite families with children to participate this year. So join us as we pass down All Souls traditions of spirituality, community, and social justice. Registration, potluck needs, and key volunteer opportunities will also be available next week, so stay tuned. We'll move now to a few shared celebrations, challenges, and sorrows among our All Souls community. Jane Simpson is in suburban ICU after a stroke and cardiac care. She is expected to recover to placement in a rehab facility in the coming weeks. We send strength to Jane and comfort to her daughter Jan as primary caregiver and to her many friends at All Souls. We rejoice that Judith Clark is back at home after treatment for kidney disease that required hospitalization and rehab. I know Dot is out there somewhere. She remains in treatment 3 times a week. We send love to Judith and housemate Dorothy Bledsoe in all the transitions of this health challenge. Sophia Fisher asked for prayers for her stepfather in Massachusetts. She plans to travel there on Wednesday as she will have her stepfather will have new scans and medical choices. We're sending care to Sophia and the family at this time of uncertainty. Finally, we offer our loving condolences to Barbara Corprew. Barbara lost her cousin Paula in Clayton, North Carolina. May Barbara feel our All Souls love coming to her as one who offers caring to so many in our congregation. And now, if you'll speak your names and situations aloud or in the Zoom chat. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life, the one of our being and our becoming, may we see the light in one another. Help us to open our hearts, minds, and spirits to the possibility of what can be. Our divine instinct tells us that we are tightly bound spirit to spirit. We are connected beyond boundaries and beyond walls. Help us to reconstruct our view of community and recenter ourselves in a new way, in a broader expanse of forgiveness and celebration, so that we may hold one another as beloved. May that be our covenant with one another. Ashe and amen.
Our reading this morning is by the Reverend Gretchen Haley. It's entitled, Change My Heart. My first year in seminary, Gretchen remembers, I interned as a chaplain at the Denver Women's Prison, where on Friday nights we'd gather for worship, which I quickly learned meant gathering around a CD player. You do remember CD players? A CD player blasting what some call Jesus is my boyfriend music. The music would fill the room, and the women would sing along with all their hearts, raising their hands in the air, filled with passion, swaying together, singing, Jesus, Jesus. I stood at the back, my arms firmly crossed, hoping to demonstrate to all who might look my way that this was not my thing. More than just feeling personally uncomfortable, I felt embarrassed for the women and for this superficial theology they had somehow embraced. And from that distanced and defended place, I just watched. So often we resist with our rational brains the experience our hearts most crave. We talk ourselves out of the love that stands so close we could almost eat it up if we would just let go and love. To receive love like that would mean a willingness to be vulnerable, an ongoing journey of transformation, a breaking open, a being born and reborn again and again. But then, during the week, the women would come and talk with me as their chaplain, and I started to get to know them, arms unfolded. I heard their stories of loss and of more struggle than you'd think a single person could survive. Then Friday would come again, and they'd sing, and they'd cry and laugh and find some relief and some comfort together. One Friday night, this song was playing. Change my heart, O God, make it ever true. Change my heart, O God, may I be like you. And suddenly it hit me. It hit me who should really be embarrassed in that room. And in case it's not clear, it wasn't the women singing and swaying. In that moment, it hit me. The words did not matter because the room was filled with life, and there was just one person in the room who was keeping herself outside that life, cut off from the fellowship of healing and forgiveness and transformation. And so I started singing, Change my heart, O God. And I stepped in a little closer to the circle, and I started singing louder, Make it ever true. And okay, yes, I was totally uncomfortable, but I was leaning into my discomfort, learning from it. Actually, it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was terrifying to let down my defenses like that, to sing those words without clarifying what I did or did not actually believe, to sing with a full voice about Jesus and his love for me. It was terrifying to give in to that experience, knowing I too had experienced pain and shame beyond what I was willing or able to share. It was terrifying to just be present in the midst of all that discomfort, in the midst of all that love. Terrifying and transforming. Because after that night, I could somehow be with more people more fully, love the world more fully, and receive love myself more fully. Uncross your arms, Gretchen concludes. Lean all the way in. Love is everywhere. Lean all the way in, uncross your arms. It may be terrifying, but it can be so liberating. Lean all the way in. Love is everywhere. Now, this is a sermon about covenant. And there's a lot to share about covenant and its history and how we hope covenant functions in this community. There's a lot to say. But the one thing I hope you take in and take away is that to get any value from covenant, to find any meaning, experience any transformation from this community grounded in covenant, you have to be willing to enter it, to move in closer to the circle, arms uncrossed, in order to benefit and find the meaning and the forgiveness and the love possible in covenanted community, you have to lean in. Love is everywhere. Yes, that's our faith. But you have to be willing to receive it, to reach for it, to commit to it, to enter into it. So remember that. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. Those words are from the covenant written by Universalist minister L. Griswold Williams in 1933. Many UU congregations use some version or adaptation of that covenant as their own. Love is the doctrine of this church. The first thing to notice is that the language is not specific. It's not about specific things to do or things not to do. And here at All Souls, there are lots of covenants. Many groups and even committees develop covenants when they meet, promises about how they'll do their work together. There are small groups called covenant groups. Tracy, in her role as executive director, and we have a covenant. The board has a leadership covenant. There are many, but the broadest is the covenant of right relations, which begins, to covenant with one another is to engage in the spiritual and everyday practice of loving better. The practice of loving better, answering the call of love, following what we come to believe love asks of us. Following. You remember the story. Yahweh freed the Israelites from bondage in Egypt, and then in the wilderness gave Moses the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. It was a covenant that he offered between Yahweh, and the Israelites. In essence, Yahweh told the Israelites, I will be your God if you will be my people. If you will be my people and follow my commandments, I will be your God. It was a mutual promise, a compact, if you will. Now, we're more accustomed to the language of covenant in our world today with punishment for lack of compliance, like the criminal justice system we need so badly to reimagine. But Yahweh did not offer a contract because the Israelites were constantly disappointing him, constantly, and having to be forgiven and called back into covenant to begin again in love, as we would say. Covenant is about aspiration, our hopes, and inspiration, and the ability to return to it when we fall short. Covenant is an invitation to align our lives with love. I promise to be your God, but only if you promise to enter, arms uncrossed, and follow where our promises will lead us. To follow. Not my will, but thine. Do you remember that verse from the Gospel of Luke? Does leaning into covenant ask us to give up our individual right to decide, the right to chart our own course, our agency in theological terms, to follow rather than to lead? Are any of you getting a little bit nervous with the direction of this sermon? So, let me wish you all an early Ramadan Mubarak. Happy Ramadan. Ramadan begins Thursday evening, a month of fasting and prayer and reflection in Islam. Islam, the word itself quite literally means submission. Muslims are those who submit to the will and the instructions of Allah, those who submit. And we welcome those who identify as Muslims in this religious space. There are All Souls members who identify as Muslim UUs, and more who have family members who do. The Muslim call to prayer has been sounded from this pulpit. A UU Muslim minister, Samar al-Bayadi, will preach for us here next month. But submission? Is there room for even that religious demand here at All Souls? Wouldn't that completely contradict our commitment to individual freedom? There's even an old Unitarian joke that those tablets Moses brought down from Sinai contain not the 10 commandments, but the 10 suggestions. The history of covenant in our progressive tradition is worth remembering, even when we need to laugh at it. Our Puritan religious ancestors, from whom both the Unitarians and the Universalists broke away in New England, grounded the practice of their faith in covenant. And Forrest Church, another UU minister, suggested that the heart of the Puritan covenants could be stated this way: to walk together in the ways of truth and affection, as best we know them now, or may learn them in days to come. With apologies for the ableist language, to walk together in the ways of truth and affection, to follow the path that love reveals, that love requires. Now, the grim theology of the pre-Puritans was soundly rejected by our religious ancestors. But the practice of collective discernment and the experience of not submission, but willingness to follow what love requires, that is actually what we mean still today when we say that ours is a covenantal tradition. Now, some of you may be thinking, this history is all very well, Bill, and it's quite fascinating, but what does it mean for us now? How is this going to help me get through the week? So remember, there was a time when there was not agreement in our churches, and I'll bet not in this church, that our churches should openly welcome gay and lesbian couples or officiate at their union ceremonies. Now, some UU ministers had been officiating kind of on the quiet, on beaches, in parks for some time, but not in sanctuaries. And now we look back and it may seem that it was all self-evident with hindsight, but there was not consensus about this for a long time. And then there were sermons, there was advocacy, there was discernment, and love's path became clear. That's the process, the covenantal process that led to the DC Marriage Equality Ordinance being signed right down here in the sanctuary. It was a covenantal process of discernment, an agreement to follow where love was leading us. I'm trying to make clear how the practice of covenant actually works. Almost all that we are proudest of in our religious history is the result of covenantal discernment and the decision to follow the requirements of love as this community and other communities came to understand them. Not submission to some specific commandments, but the spiritual and everyday practice of loving better. When I preach that All Souls is a place where you can come as you are, but not stay as you are, I'm describing how this covenantal faith works to inspire and to challenge and hopefully to transform us all. I loved having our land acknowledgement offered this morning by someone on Zoom who named other Native peoples on other pieces of land. But here's a question for you. Does the practice of covenant require physical presence? Is covenant about a particular group of people in person, eye to eye, on a particular piece of ground? Or, in this new hybrid spiritual space, can the practice of covenant be done in a spiritual community that is also virtual? Do we need to be face-to-face to do the discernment and live out the commitment that covenant requires? The covenants of the early Puritan churches were robust, calling for what they described as admonition, little finger wagging, calling people out and calling them in, even calling congregations out that seem not to be following the commands of love. But those covenants fell apart when the churches grew apart physically. As the settler colonists moved far west, far away from the neighborhood of Boston to lands in western Massachusetts. The covenant was not able to stretch geographically, but then they didn't have the internet or Zoom either. The question is live here at All Souls. The Board of Trustees has been considering changes to the All Souls bylaws, and I know talk of bylaws is going to lose some of you. But one of the questions the bylaws address is membership in the covenant. So here's the question: should All Souls welcome into membership individuals and families who do not live near enough to be present in the sanctuary, at least on a regular basis? Now, we have done that, by which I mean that we have official legal members who live at a distance, a few, many of them folks who once attended in person and moved away. But what about folks like Jean, who gave our land acknowledgement, who has visited a couple of times, but was never regularly in this sanctuary? What about folks who've never been here physically, who've never crossed the threshold of this church? Should there be a separate, less than full membership category for those members of the community? Is physical presence required to be a part of the covenant that is this church? Now I'm looking, I see Maya Herman, who is here, who led the bylaws review team. Thank you, Maya, for that good piece of work. Should the congregation make the decision to retain a single category of membership, whether you're here in person or on Zoom, which is the recommendation of the task force, by the way, then whole new possibilities begin to emerge for us. A possible broader path for what ministry at All Souls might come to embody as we discern what love is asking of us in this new and very hybrid era. Will All Souls become even more of a national church, a UU national cathedral, if you will? How would that, if it came to pass, how might that impact our commitment to Adams Morgan here and the particular neighborhood in which these buildings sit? Another question: will we create effective approaches to religious education for children and youth at a distance as well as in this facility? Can religious education be hybrid somehow? If we embrace our hybrid reality, what happens to the local advocacy and justice work, DC statehood that Tracy mentioned, that is such a clear priority, as Reverend Rob preached just last week? So many questions that love will be asking us to answer. Now, I've covered quite a bit of territory this morning, I know. But a couple of things. First, remember, covenant requires us. It only works when we engage, when we lean in, arms uncrossed, hearts open. Then there is the promise to follow where love leads. When we open our hearts and listen individually and discern collectively, covenant asks us to follow where love leads. And that means we promise to be open to change, to transformation. And that's a challenging concept. And like the Israelites, this covenant is not made or followed just among us, just between the individuals here and online, because there's a larger love that we serve. However we know and name that love, the God of our hearts and of our hopes is a part of the promise of this faith and is present in our covenant as well. The larger love is what we listen for in our discernment and promise to follow in our practice. We really commit to each other and to that spirit of life and of love. This covenantal faith asks us to lean in, to follow where love leads, and to welcome transformation and growth, to be the people who answer the call of love. So all of those things, yes it is, but there's one more. Our practice is a promise that abundance can be ours, that a full life can be lived even in these trying times. Our practice is a promise that there actually is a love that has never broken faith with us and never will. And that the practice of covenant in this community can open possibilities for more love and more joy and more hope for all of us. Abundant, fulsome life, that is the promise we are invited into. That is the covenantal promise of this faith. Because we still believe, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, that love is everywhere, or at least that it can be everywhere. This faith is not for the faint of heart, because the promise and the practice that we embrace asks us to believe in the power of love, and then to live that power into life. May that be so. Ashe and amen.
Okay, so it's cold outside, but today is the first day of the National Cherry Blossom Festival here in Washington, D.C. And a wonderful Washington, D.C. poet and my own beloved poetry teacher, Judith Harris, published a short poem about this time of year. And it's titled In Your Absence, and I'm just going to read a few lines. I look up to see a blizzard of petals rushing the sky. It is only April. I can't stop my own life from hurrying by. All Souls fills my soul like poetry and nature. It reminds me to stay in the moment and look up in wonder, lest I miss a flurry of petals. All Souls is fulfilling its part of the covenant with us, holding together a web of interconnectedness here in this sacred space, strong and able to catch any one of us should we fall. I'm committed to fulfilling my end of that covenant by supporting All Souls with my time and my treasure. Life is hurrying by. It's almost April, friends. All Souls really needs us all to make our pledges by April 1st in order to ensure that they have the time to carefully plan what can be done on behalf of our community throughout the fiscal year. I've made my timely pledge, and I've increased it for this reason. Will you join me? All Souls is also in covenant with our broader community, and together we can lift up the vital work that so many organizations do here in DC. And to that end, All Souls now has a Share the Plate collection. Every month, 50% of all non-pledge contributions go to a great organization that we wish to support. The organization for March is Beacon House, founded by All Souls member Reverend Don Robinson. Beacon House promotes academic success and personal growth for children in Washington, D.C.'s Ward 5. Thank you for your generosity as we now receive the offering.
Friends, please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn. Our choir is going to teach you the melody a few times through, and then we're going to try to lead this in a 4-part canon. So the altos, we figured out a better way to do this, at least I think we did. The altos are going to cue this balcony. The tenors are going to cue this section. Look, you're all like, okay, we can do that. Oh, sorry, just kidding. The basses are going to cue this section. The tenors are going to cue this section, and the sopranos will cue this balcony. It's a little friendly competition.
There is love. For us, that is a statement of faith. And for us, it is also a promise. Our promise is to bring that love into the world by how we live. That promise is to make to one another, and we make that promise to the God we know in our lives. Our promise and our practice is to journey together toward our hope, the vision of beloved community, held by that love that has never broken faith with us and never will. Ashe and amen.
I was going to say, you know that moment when there's that longer set change than you expect when you're at the theater? This is just a big set change. Thank you.